Hello and welcome to The Big Picture. I'm Tracy Shilshi, and today our focus is on the U.S. administration's new immigration policy. President Donald Trump has laid the groundwork for potentially deporting millions of undocumented immigrants by issuing a new policy memo, in fact new policy memos, two of them, that broaden the ways in which federal immigration laws should be enforced. The order is causing serious concerns through U.S. immigrant communities, where millions of people who have spent years building families and livelihoods in the country were seriously threatened with deportation for the first time in decades. Now, any immigrant who is in the country illegally and is charged or convicted of any offense or even suspected of a crime will now be an enforcement priority. That could include people arrested for shoplifting or even minor offenses or simply having crossed the border illegally. So how do the new directives differ from the existing laws, and how may they impact illegal immigrants, especially the nearly 3 lakh Indian Americans there? At least that's the number that we know since the 2014 figures. We have an esteemed panel today. We've got Professor K.P. Vijayalakshmi, who of course specializes in U.S. studies at SIS and JNU. We've got A.K. Bhattacharya, who's the editorial director with Business Standard, and S.K. Sarkar, who's the executive council member at the Indo-American Chamber of Commerce. And also joining us from the capital, we've got Raman, who's the chairman and managing director of Quatrro, a pioneer in India's BPO industry. Mr. Roy, if I could come to you first, these guidelines that are coming out, these memos, is that something that Indians should be worried about, the ones who are in the U.S.?
No, not really. The 400,000, 300,000 figure that you referred to are people who are there on very valid visa documents. Our industry, and these are from the IT industry, our industry does not rely on any illegal immigrants. So I don't see any issue that emanates from these memos that would impact the IT industry in any way.
Okay, all right. Is that what you feel as well, Mr. Sarkar? But even though there are reports stating that there are, of course, a few lakh at least of illegal immigrants in the U.S., it's a number that, of course, Indian authorities have no track about, except American think tanks who perhaps give them these numbers. Is that what you feel as well, though?
Well, of the 11 million that's being talked about, at least 500,000 are of Indian origin. And I think the government of India is seized of the matter. And obviously, that's an issue. So I wouldn't say that there's no issue at all, but of course they are in the very low category jobs. But America needs them, and I would like to come to the point that Donald Trump is actually a businessman who became president by accident. And such a person, you have to have economic policies which cater to your policy problems. So when you think of that, immigration by itself is not a bad thing. I'm not advocating that it should be illegal, but immigration by itself is something which a country would need, provided, of course, it is on that growth path. And let me do a little bit of out-of-the-box thinking, and I think I would like to link this to the fertility rate. You have fertility rates for I'll just give you 3 rates, 2.1, 1.9 and 1.3. 2.1 is when you are able to sustain yourself, the nation is able to sustain itself. 1.9, you're a little struggling. At 1.3, you're actually degrading. So it's a situation in which when you are, America is definitely not 2.1, so it's much less than that. So when that situation arises, that immigrations are bound to occur, and immigrants will always find their way into that country. More important than that, I think Trump talked about the Mexican wall, which is, I believe, will cost something like $10 billion to $38 billion. Why is it that America caps the visa fees? Why doesn't the fees go up to an extent which I think by some calculations $40 billion collection may not be too difficult a task if you have the right strategy. I mean, if you have the market oriented visa fees. I mean, let's take the example of California. California, the agriculture is a very important role to play, and most of them are immigrants. And I don't think maybe it's not too nice to have immigrants, but I think it's quite an essential part of California that they have to have those immigrants from outside. So that's one example. Then there's of course construction. So if you and Donald Trump is in that industry himself. So if you look at all these and you combine all these factors, I strongly feel that you will have to have economic policies which cater to your policy issues. You cannot just wake up one day and say that the immigrants will have to go and they will have to be deported. So that's something which it hurts. It suddenly could hit the economy as immediately.
All right, Mr. Roy, very quickly, you would like to respond?
So I think Mr. Sarkar raised the point of Indians as immigrants. You asked me a question that what the impact would be to the IT industry. Of the immigrants of Indian origin, there is a component of that is with IT industry, and I'd like to reinforce that the IT industry does not use illegal immigrants for fulfilling its obligations to its customers. Yes, there are other Indian immigrants and there are issues of what those Indian immigrants are because they don't necessarily belong to the IT industry.
Yes.
I just wanted to bring out the distinction. If we want to take this discussion beyond that to what the challenges are of Indian immigrations and what the needs are of that country, whether there's a growth or a degrowth, we can take it down that path, but IT industry is not impacted by that discussion.
Absolutely. In fact, the bill is not even focusing on H-1B visas for now, at least. That is at least, the silver lining, if you could call it, at least at the moment. But Professor Vijayalakshmi, do you agree that this is,
every country has a right to protect its borders.
Absolutely,
and
we
see
get that.
they
We
do
understand
not have
that.
illegal
But
immigrants.
what we're trying to know is that, is this the kind of a knee-jerk reaction that the U.S. at the moment needs, that the migrants in the country, the illegal migrants, or for that matter, the ones even on valid visas, is this the kind of reaction that they need because of the very fact that this actually allows security personnel to question and even take in custody people on the basis of just suspicion? And I think that is what is also making people a little more wary. What is your assessment of what is going on at the moment, Professor?
Well, firstly, President Trump has not suddenly come out with these initiatives.
Yes.
From day one, the executive actions on a variety of issues, and some of them have been on travel bans, and immigration has formed a very major plank of his campaign. He has promised his constituents and the voters and the American public that he is planning and he is determined to have a policy in which immigration, especially illegal immigration, will face tough action. And he's not afraid of changing the status quo. Okay? He came across and he won the election on a revisionist plank. So that said, what are his latest salvos? Now, the two memos that you referred to, and I'm not getting into whether it's India, related. We're not into that right now. The assessment is that ICE, that is the Immigration Customs Enforcement, has been given these powers. Now, there's a history to the problems of immigrants and the way they should be allowed or not allowed inside the United States. This has been a political debate for several years now. The Gang of Eight had actually, a bipartisan panel in the Congress, led by John McCain and others, actually tried to come up with certain ways of making citizenship possible for these people. But please note, the 11 million we're talking about are clearly indicated as illegal immigrants, which means they have no valid visa. So arguing about deportation of a person who does not have valid visa is in itself a problematic one in one sense, because what do you do with a person whose visas have expired? But then there are problems. Why? I'll tell you why. Because first of all, he seems to be pushing a state-federal confrontation as well, apart from a political confrontation with the advocates of gradual immigration reform in which illegal immigrants also might get a way to citizenship,
Yes.
which was already advocated, and much discussion went on. People are not happy about it, but it's going on. The second part of that political debate began with his campaign when he said that the previous governments have been pussyfooting on this issue simply because they think that this is something that they can get votes out of, voter fraud. So many political narratives have been mingled into the immigration debate. But the main plank on which he was campaigning was about the fear of immigrants. There was voter anger about Washington's, governance model. There was already voter anger on inequalities that we know now are increasing in the United States, both income-wise and otherwise. So many other issues. But voter anger was translated or channeled into fear of immigrants and fear of safety, physical safety, terrorism. So these two issues really was an emotional connect for many people. So that's the political. Now, what has he done structurally was that smart cities, sanctuary cities, I'm sorry. He says those cities in which, immigrants come, then they don't follow up proper procedures. So it's also procedural, all this kind of thing. But the memos by themselves asking for deportation have two very major consequences. The main, I think, is the main country that's affected is Mexico. And the problem here is that earlier there used to be a concession for those who are not convicted of felonies or crimes and so on and so forth. Now they are saying no special categories exist. Immediate deportation. And the reason they are giving is that, look, we don't have the money to keep having deportation centers till the immigration process and the hearings go on. We don't have place for these guys. So let them go back. And more than that, what they're saying, that those who entered through Mexico, whether they are Mexican origin or not, all will be deported.
Absolutely.
So that really is the fear. The second assessment that you might want to look at is the sad one on DACA, which is the children, affecting the children. Now, the children, his criticism has remained that Obama, which offered the same, deportation was done under Obama administration also, maximum number of deportations. And he said, but the way they were doing the deportations, many who stayed back were in fact aware that this immigration process will go on for so many years. They were in fact protection. That was the criticism given. Now, but for children who are alone, I think that's where you really have a heart-rending issue. So I don't know if you can be so mechanical in applying administrative logic. Like an accountant wanting to balance books, but you don't spend the money for the purpose it was given. That kind of mechanical administrative ethics. Now, if that's the case, these children, where will they go? And how will that be? But there are issues in the border states also saying that, unaccompanied children are being trafficked. So as to get advantage of the immigration procedure. So my main take is the sending back the immigrants to Mexico without waiting for the process to complete itself is adding to the tensions with your nearest neighbor.
Absolutely.
There are other trade issues, so many other issues, but this is a very major issue of tension. And Secretary of State is going there. I'm sure it's going to be part of the discussion.
Just one small point to add to what the professor was saying. He's made an exemption for dreamers. Dreamers, of course, he of course means the children. And he's also made an exemption for parents of children born in America. So that kind of a situation, that he's not as inhuman as he appears to be.
Oh, okay, all right. Mr. Bhattacharya, do you agree with these views? Because if you think about it, illegal immigrants, I mean it's illegal, the word itself. So,
as you rightly pointed out, this is talking about illegal immigrants. Now, we have to understand the political context in which this order was issued. The political context was that President Trump's original order of barring entry of immigrants from 7 countries have been challenged in the court of law, and that stands deferred for the moment. Now, I think President Trump was obviously looking at fulfilling his electoral or political agenda on which he came to power on immigration. And I think this is one order that probably cannot be struck down by any court of law. Because he's talking about illegal immigrants.
And on paper, it sounds
you cannot
perfectly
possibly
fine.
argue that there's nothing wrong with that. That's point number 2. Point number 3, as far as India is concerned, and I think we are discussing about India here, India has got on paper around 300,000 illegal immigrants in the US, according to Indo-American studies
Yes.
and the paper, and even unofficial numbers put out by the US government
Yes.
says that there are 300,000 illegal immigrants from Indian origin there. Now, that would be an issue. Now, clearly, whether you may take a position that illegal immigrants, therefore they can be deported, but this is bound, if the order is enforced, this number is not small.
Yes.
This is going to be a diplomatic issue, and the Indian government will have to take it up with the US government. So therefore, let us not assume that just because they are illegal immigrants, Indian government can actually keep quiet about it. So this has some diplomatic fallout,
Yes.
which will have to be played out, and the government of India cannot remain silent. Number 4, and that's my final point, that this immigration order cannot end in itself,
Yes.
because this is a clear sign that we may say that the H-1B visa row is not up for discussion or up for debate right now, but the fact of the matter is this, that already consultations are going on, and going by the Silicon Valley rumblings there, the Indian IT community, which is around 275,000 people there, they are already disturbed. And the fact of the matter is this, that at the diplomatic level, my understanding is this, consultations are at a very hectic pace going on between the US government and the Indian government to make sure that there is no adverse fallout on the Indian IT community,
Yes.
which actually provide jobs of around 400,000 people in the US. So I think the Indian government is going to use its clout to some extent to make sure that the H-1B visa issue does not affect the Indian community.
Yes.
But on the question of 300,000 illegal immigrants of Indian origin being there, I think it is going to be a diplomatic issue, and this has to be sorted out at that level.
Absolutely. And also, Mr. Sarkar, if I could come to you, you know, civil rights groups, ever since this memo, or for that matter, even during the travel ban, which of course, like has been pointed out, has been deferred for now. But, you know, during the time of even his campaigning, the main thing that is also coming out now is, forget the very fact that it's written illegal immigrants. It's basically trying to say who is American and who is an outsider.
Absolutely.
And I think the larger debate is regarding that, you know, and you're trying to make Americans who've been living there for years, who have generations, but they are second-class citizens. They are not, you know, they are not Americans. And that is the bigger debate, isn't it?
Well, you see, his slogan is "Make America Great Again." Yeah, you want to comment?
Mr. I'll just come to you. I'll just come to you, sir.
As I said, his tagline is "Make America Great Again." So that's what he's trying to appeal to the masses. Now, my point here is that as a person who studied economics, it doesn't make sense to me that when you start hitting out at such a large number of illegal immigrants, because your economy is going to suffer in the process. As I pointed out, as I said it earlier also, agriculture and construction are two areas where illegal immigrants play a very large role. So you need to make that up through some kind of fees, hiking the fees. So if you upscale the fees, maybe you will be able to solve quite a few issues. And paradoxically, I mean, let's try and understand this. America actually is a land of immigrants. Would it throw out 330 million people out of that country? Not possible. And anyway, America is always seen as a place of great horizon, a place where great hopes lie. So the illegality of the immigration has to stop, which I agree with. But you cannot deport this kind of a large number of immigrants from that country, because it's something which will hit his economy. And as Donald Trump is a businessman, he is the first to understand. He should be the first to understand that. And ultimately, let's be very clear that everything ultimately balances out. You just can't have 11 million people just leaving the country and the country survives.
Yes.
I mean, maybe it will survive, but it will definitely, its growth rate will be affected.
All right. Mr. Roy, you'd like to come in?
Just one point. Let me say to Mr. Sarkar's point that demonetization also made no economic sense, but it worked politically. So my limited take is that very often economic decisions that do not make political decisions which do not make economic sense makes a lot of political sense, and I think it will give him a lot of bargaining power, and he will try to reorder the system to the way he likes. So it's a political move.
Yes.
And it doesn't make economic sense. But as I said, demonetization was also didn't make economic sense, and
Yes.
it did have an impact in either way.
All right, Mr. Roy.
Let me just say this, I have to add this before I
So, Mr. Bhattacharya, you make a great point on comparing this to demonetization and the economic sense. You know, whether they take out the 11 million illegal immigrants, or whether the 300,000 or whatever figure that has been calculated to be Indians is impacted or not, I think that is one part, and that can be deliberated. I think every country has its right to protect its borders, to see that people don't illegally come into the country. You know, in the eastern part of the country, we as India have some issues where we don't want people crossing our porous borders, and frankly, we'd be very supportive of every country doing the things that is right for them. However, in this case, one aspect that is not coming out that I think is crucial and central is the power that is intended to be given to the immigration officials. And at the end of the day, they are human beings. Number one, that force is going to be tremendously increased. There is talk of giving power for the ability to arrest pending investigation. I mean, that is the equivalent of declaring an emergency. And in a country, as Mr. Sarkar correctly pointed out, it is a country of immigrants. You do not have it written, by the color of your skin, the language, your accent. There is nothing that determines that you're an immigrant. And if you give such draconian powers to people to be able to investigate and arrest, and those powers end up being misused,
Yes.
that can have tremendous repercussions. That is where I think the Indians who are legally living there, they are not illegal immigrants. But even in today's world, anecdotally, I hear of kids who are school-going kids, second generation, they were born in the United States of America, their parents were of Indian origin, being stopped on the roads and being told that they are illegal immigrants. So that is the fair psychosis that is happening.
Yes,
How
absolutely.
the
And that
draconian
is
powers
exactly
will
what
be
I was saying about the
misused.
timing. Yes.
And
Absolutely. And Mr.
I
Roy, do you
don't
think
know
it's
if
going
there
to
is a
stop at
short-term
this? Are you
solution to
worried
that.
that this is going to seep into other structures of perhaps visa, other structures of maybe green card holders, other structures of people who are waiting for asylum? Do you think it's going to seep into that as well?
Well, I actually have a slightly broader view to this. I know there is a lot of talk of H-1B visas. You know, if you look at the legislation that various members have introduced, they have advocated an increase in the minimum wages. Number one. Number two, they have advocated that the number of H-1B visas that are issued should be reduced. The entire H-1B visa program is to bring in skills that are in short supply in the United States of America. And those skills are there, and in IT industry it happens to be Indians. In the pharmaceutical industry it may be a different country. In hospitality it may be a different country. It is a country of immigrants. But it is the misuse of the draconian powers that could be an issue. I don't see a country of immigrants not allowing legitimate immigrants coming
Yes.
into the future, especially
right.
where there
Just
are
one-
skill
All
right.
gaps.
I'm sorry,
and,
Mr. Roy, I'm running short of time. Some quick
employability
points I need to get from the
be
panel
able
here
to
as
meet their
well.
local needs.
Yes, Mr. Sarkar, yeah.
One small point which I wanted for the to give for the information of the viewers on the draconian part. Donald Trump is employing 10,000 ICE workers, that is immigration and custom workers, and also he's employing 5,000 CBP workers, which is customs and border protection workers. I quite agree that this is an area where there could be a lot of harassment, there could be a lot of problems which could be created.
Yes.
And it could be used not for the benefit of the country, but maybe it could create a lot of friction.
All right, Professor, very quickly, I need to wind up the show now.
I
Yes.
know. When it comes to me, you must be quick. Let me be very, very quick. Number one, the problem of H-1B visas is also about stopping U.S. companies really not really focused on the immigration itself, but, you know, the gaming done by U.S. companies and, you know, his fight to bring back those companies to things. That's one limited point. The second one point is, when you talk about the draconian powers, it's really the local police that's going to be worrisome, because all ICE and CPB are probably major forces which are already Homeland Security has been working. The role of the local police under the Nationality and Immigration Act itself has been quite large, but this increase in the role of local police is in a way upsetting the community balances
Yes.
of the immigrants already there in the United States. And I think that point needs to be think. But the real issue will come when the challenges will come, because, you know, the ramifications of this is he's also rescinded the privacy laws that Bush administration and others had given. That is, one agency need not share all the information about a potential suspect of an immigration racket or whatever to another one who's about to start some. So, you know, all that, if you take away all the privacy protections, if you take away everything, you know, that I think is serious. I mean, that way, apart from, of course, the point that was made by the earlier panelist about, you know, school children or anybody who looks different.
Absolutely.
The other.
Absolutely.
Demonizing the other is the real problem of campaigning on fear.
All right.
Because you have to have something to fear, right? So that's my first point in any case. But privacy laws, these are in the real world. And that will really also bring in challenges from advocates of proper immigration. So it's going to go into courts again. And, you know, immigrants who are in transit, so to speak, and the courts are listening, think of their plight. It's going to be a problem for them too.
I'm sorry, we're running short of time, ma'am.
No,
running short of time. Thank you so much to all of you for joining me on this debate, which I'm sure is going to be continuing for weeks. Is this the end of it? We don't know. Rights activists, of course, calling it a witch hunt. We'll have to wait and see what eventually happens, but we'll keep you updated right here on Rajya Sabha TV. That's it for the moment, though, on The Big Picture. Thank you.